So, all right. So, welcome to our first official non-introductory lecture for intermediate microeconomic theory. There's a lot of background, and if you read this kind of stuff will appear in the introductory section of the textbook that you have. But I asked you all to define economics, and I think there were some, I would say pretty worthy responses. I not that any of them were like bad or inappropriate, but it's kind of like difficult to summarize succinctly what is economics, because we have microeconomics and we have macroeconomics. So I'll just do that for you here. So the definition that I like, the one I think is best, is economics is the scientific study of resource allocation mechanisms. Okay, and as you probably have guessed, and a lot of your responses showed, the mechanism that we most often study is what we call the market. And often there'll be adjectives in front of this: a competitive market, an imperfect market, or imperfectly competitive market, maybe a market with externalities, or a market like the extreme of a market that has market power in it is, and we haven't defined market power yet, so I'm kind of relying on what you have learned, hopefully in principles of economics. But the extreme version of just being one seller in a market's a monopoly, but that's also a market. And then in this class we'll study markets that are suffering from some government policy of one type or another. Price controls and taxes are our main concerns, because those are the types of policies that politicians most likely and most often in the past have wanted to foist upon markets, right? To impose on markets. And so, but the market is just one mechanism. There are lots of other mechanisms for allocating resources in a society, and it just really depends, but none of them is outside of the bounds of economics. So I'll ask you really quickly, can anybody think of any other ways? So it's kind of important, each one of these words is chosen carefully so it's succinct, right? And we can talk about science in just a minute, one of my favorite subjects. But when I say resource allocation mechanisms, I think one of the things that folks might get a little bit confused by is allocation is a word often used in economics, but it just means assignment to either a consumer or a producer in society. So we have all this stuff, and when we talk about resources, we can talk a little bit more about exactly what resources are, but you would actually kind of be hard pressed to look around in your physical reality and see anything that to an economist doesn't qualify as a resource. The standard categories that we use, but hopefully as your understanding of economics becomes a little bit more refined, you realize that the categories are just conventions. They're not hard and fast, you know, truths that everybody in economics agrees on. And but the common, resources that folks talk about are land, labor, and capital. Okay, so can anybody else think of any other ways in which we assign resources for the use of some business in society, our society, the United States, other societies do this too, that aren't the one that we most often study, and does, meaning, they're not the market. And does anybody have any suggestions for why we're focusing on markets as, at least in intermediate microeconomic theory, as opposed to other mechanisms for assigning resources for the use of or pleasure of some entity, either an individual or a business entity in society? So that's the question. Other mechanisms? Anybody? Okay.
Professor, could you repeat the question really quick, please?
Well, do you see where the 3 question marks are?
Oh, okay, sorry.
I wouldn't leave you hanging. I know sometimes my questions get a little bit long-winded, but so if you do have an answer you'd like to volunteer, and I heard somebody else speak up, go ahead and raise your hand. I have the participant screen open right now, so I'll be able to call on you. Okay, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I was wondering if, like, would patents work?
Well, maybe in a way, right? So you assign a patent, but it's not you, right, Jeffrey? Who assigns the patent's rights? Okay, you brought it up. You gotta help us out. Are you still there, Jeffrey?
I'm still thinking about it.
Okay, well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's because it's not the best example, and that's okay too. But I was going to say, the patent rights are assigned by the government, right? A patent is a license that the government issues that allows you to enforce a monopoly, right? A government granted monopoly for the right to produce whatever is patented by you, the patent holder, unless, of course, you assign those rights to somebody else. You sell the patent, or you could sell rights to use the patent, which a lot of patent holders do. But yeah, that's the government, and this is kind of what I wanted to get at, and this is what I like about your responses. The government itself, right, is a mechanism of assignment. Now we have to think a little bit more deeply about that. But you see what I'm saying, right? The government's saying, oh yeah, this is yours. It's not like you bought it or sold it at Target or on eBay. The government gave it to you. You agree, disagree?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, is there anything you wanted to add?
I'm just like thinking about, like, you could think of it as like intellectual property.
Well, you said patent. So a patent is, actually even mentioned in the Constitution of the United States. It's a legal license. So intellectual property. Well, maybe we'll get to another example. Keontae, you were going to say something.
I'm not sure if this counts as a mechanism. Would something like opportunity cost?
Well, no, see, so now I want you to think about mechanism in, I mean, at least, metaphorically in a mechanical way, right? So if you think about it, right, in the market, you go down to Target and you buy a pair of AirPods, right? And that's society saying, okay, Keontae, now you have the right to use these AirPods for your pleasure. You bought them, through the market, where the market is just a collection of buyers and sellers, right? You paid a price. Now, so that's what you have to think about, is like, so mechanism is what is the mechanical feature of you getting assigned the, let's just call it the right to use or enjoy some, something that you do, whether it be your morning coffee or the home you live in or whatever else. Do you see what I mean, Keontae?
Yeah.
So mechanism is like it's a mechanics type thing. Like this goes to that person, this goes to another person, that sort of thing, or a business. So that's why I said that, if you think about it, some people do get assigned resources, right, directly from the government. So you apply, for example, for some sort of government aid. Maybe people got it through COVID, and it kind of depends. Some aid comes in the form of a money transfer, right? But some aid is actual, like particularly like disaster relief. When FEMA goes down and hands out bottles of water when there's been a hurricane, or FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, when they go down with some cleanup equipment and they clean up your front yard, or they I don't know if you remember, but a while back when they had some bad hurricanes down in the southern United States, they had these housing units they called FEMA trailers, and the Federal Emergency Management Association was distributing these mobile homes / trailers for people to live in. It's okay, this is yours, right? The government's just giving you this physical thing for you to live in for a while. So but can anybody else think of other mechanisms, how people?
Would oil be one?
Well, okay, so oil is a commodity, but so throw that out a little bit more for me. What oil would be a resource, right?
Yes.
So Gilbert, how do you get assigned oil? You go buy.
Yeah, you go buy it.
Yeah, that's market, right? So is there another way to get oil?
You can, I guess, buy shares through it. You can also buy like crude. You can also, I guess, like private sectors have oil as well. So it's not just government.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, is you're purchasing, right, all of those things. So that's market. Yeah. So that's a standard market transaction. Well, I wanna so there's some things that you guys are kind of talking about. I'll do one more. So Keontae, you tell me, what do you think?
Just based off what you said, I was actually thinking about oil too. I was thinking, would war or like fighting for what you want or over certain materials be considered then a way to divide the resources, like fighting or war itself?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So conquest, right? I take your stuff, is a mechanism, and it's not outside the realm of economists. So just so you understand, one of the things that may be a little bit different for folks here, and I gave you a little introduction to myself. I have a PhD in economics, and I'm a professor here at the university, and I'm a full tenured professor, and I don't know if you all know what that means, but part of the money that the university pays me every single year, every single month, is for doing research in economics. And so, you know, I have a research obligation, and that's the reason why from time to time I publish a research paper, or other people write books and things like that. And you know, we're supposed to be you know, advancing the field of economics, right? Uncovering new ideas about how resource mechanisms operate. And so yeah, so some people do study you know, the economics of war, and that's a legitimate study of, you know, resource allocation mechanisms. I don't know if you want to say anything else, Chianti. Your hand is still up, so yeah. And some people, that falls under the heading of the law of the jungle, where folks just, you know, take stuff. So you know, outside the market. So you might think of looting or that sort of thing. And also, you know, more formally, right, we have particular ways that some markets function that economists study, and these are auction mechanisms. So let's just put down, so government. Now, government generally in economics falls under the heading of how the government functions is political economy. Okay. And there is the economics of takings. So I'll call that war, crime, right? And one of the ones that gets at like how actually markets function is auction theory. So let's see, let's talk to Josu, you here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you ever heard of like these art auctions at Christie's? It's like a famous art auction house where they'll like, okay, well, okay. Well, do you have an idea of an art auction? Like sometimes some people in tuxedos get together and drink martinis and, you know, bid over the price of, you know, a Picasso or something like that.
Yeah, I have an idea.
Yeah, and like, have you ever seen the movies? They sit there with their little paddles and they bid and stuff like that. Well, there are different ways to run auctions. I'll just give you two examples. The one that you're probably familiar with is an English auction, and that's where, you know, if I'm auctioning off something that you find desirable, and I'll say, okay, Josu, how much are you willing to bid? And you'll say, you know, like $100. And then I'll say, is anybody willing to beat that? Anybody go for 110, right? And then we keep bidding it up. Well, there's another type of auction called a Dutch auction. It's not English, it's Dutch. And the Dutch auction, I start at a price that's so high, nobody wants it. So I'll say, okay, well, is anybody willing to pay $1 million for this thing? And nobody says that it's worth $1 million. And then I bring it down, right? And say, okay, 900,000, 800,000 until somebody says yes, and then the auction stops, right? So there are different ways to run auctions, and economists have studied the outcomes of these different ways of doing auctions. And in fact, a lot of you know, stuff that you probably use every day, in particular internet search results, they have, you know, auction experts that help design how companies, you know, get their search results at the top of Google's page for different search terms and that sort of thing. So So there are other mechanisms, and I just wanted to point that out to everybody here. The idea that allocation is about assigning goods and services, resources to businesses, so you understand what we're studying. You know, how do these things function, and what are their results? And hopefully everybody understands that the goal in the big picture sense is to understand not only how these mechanisms for allocating resources work, but also to understand when some are good and some are bad, right? So a lot of what we'll be studying in this class at the beginning is that you know, markets are influenced by government policy, and most of the examples will show at the beginning of the class, price controls being one and taxes being another, have what economists have identified as undesirable or negative impacts on the way that those mechanisms function. So a lot of times you'll hear, you know, the government's interfering with the market, and that can have undesirable consequences for the functioning of the mechanism and for society more generally. So that's the thing we want to kind of get our hands around. And does anybody have an idea of, so this is my other question that I asked you, is why markets? Why do we spend so much time studying markets? Anybody? Okay. Okay, Alondra, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So what do you think about it? Why do we study markets? I mean, well, I was going to say, because it's not the only way to assign resources, right? Like one of the big alternatives is at the front here, which is we could just have the government. You know, the government could assign. Do you have a car, Alondra?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So the government could assign you a car. The government could assign you a house. And lots of places in the past, and you know, still today, the government has a big role in deciding, you know, those types of purchasing decisions. You know, so why do we spend so much time focused on markets?
Is it then to give people the freedom so they can choose on their own?
Well, I mean, that's kind of like a nice idea, right? you know, and honestly, I think you're on to something in that I do believe that in the past, people have made arguments that are basically like, well, I don't want, do you want to tell us what kind of car you have, Alondra, or no?
Yeah, I have a Chevy Malibu.
Okay, nice. So, but would you have liked the government to say to pick that for you, or are you happier you got to pick it yourself?
Happier I got to pick it myself.
Yeah. Which color did you get?
Navy blue.
Navy blue. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. So, and is the interior black, or is it some other color?
No, it's gray.
It's gray. Okay. Yeah. So, but, and I'm assuming based on all your choices and everything like that, so you picked that particular car. But yeah, you know, in the very beginning, you may have heard this, but you know, the first major manufacturer of automobiles in the United States was Henry Ford, and he for a while insisted that all cars should be black. There should be no difference between them. So he only sold black cars for a while. you imagine everybody having exactly the same? Make the parking lot difficult, right? Where's my car? Where's my car? So, but yeah, so if the government had chosen for you, Alondra, maybe they had chosen something different, right? Oh, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah. So people have talked about freedom as, being helpful in some way to people generally in the past. But really, the reason we focus on markets, especially in the United States, is because they're the most common form of allocation mechanism. You see what I mean? Like, can you think of anything that you have that wasn't purchased?
Like gifts?
Yeah, right. And that's another mechanism, is like gift giving, like which we would call, like, transfers within property. But almost everything that you have was purchased in the market, even if it was purchased by somebody else, right, to give to you. So
Right.
so markets, especially in the United States, so it turns out that about 70% of all resources in the US are assigned through market, I'll just say market exchange, which is another good word. And also, you can probably imagine, and a lot of people have argued, that people, not just people here in the United States or people in Western Europe, but people all around the world, have had a tendency for tens and thousands of years to exchange things with each other. And fundamentally, right, we think of, you go to Target and you pay with dollars, right, to get what you want. But they have evidence that folks, tens of thousands of years, instead of using dollars, because they didn't have dollars, right, they used like seashells and ornamental beads as like a form of currency. But they still would get together and they would trade things. And so market behavior is widespread, and it's very common. So that's why we study it, and we study it first. Okay, so does anybody have any questions right now? So I defined resource allocation and mechanisms, and so I also want to point out that if you do have any questions about any of these terms, then you can look in the text and you can get more examples. And I actually gave you guys a reference, and I think it's it's like worth a read, and it's a pretty straightforward and simple text, which is the Boundless Economics text, which is a principles level text, which is the prerequisite for this course. And you can go there and get more examples. I do want to spend a little bit more time on the idea of what's a resource. So let's see. So Andy Nguyen, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So when I say, and again, these are just general labels that are commonly used, these aren't hard and fast, but when I say land is a resource, do you know what I mean by that?
Kind of. I would kind of think that it's like the potential to be able to utilize the land that we have, I would think.
Yeah, so like, obviously, if I say, Andy, this plot of land on the Newport coast is yours, right? Then you could use it to build a house, you could, I don't know if you've seen, there's some, and I'm sure these folks are very, very wealthy because they've been around for a long time. Have you ever like been driving around in Irvine or various places around here, and you see these little plots of farm? It's Mancero Farms.
I
And
don't think that I've seen Mancero Farms.
yeah, well, okay, I guess because I've been living around here for a long time, but there are places I drive. Has anybody else seen Mancero Farms? They'll like grow little strawberries and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but they normally have these plots of land in these like really, really nice neighborhoods. And you know, someday they're gonna sell those off, and either they're gonna build luxury homes or they're gonna build condos there or something. But they've had these little plots of land probably forever. So yeah, so the land is yours. You can do what you want with it. But I also want to point out that when we talk about mineral resources like oil, or we talk about agricultural resources like growing vegetables and fruits or grain or something like that, those are all what economists consider generally land or products of the land, right? So it doesn't have to be bare land, it's land. Okay, and the potential, and also we include in the category of land like clean air and clean water and climate and things like that are generally land. So some people use the term natural resources as a way of conveying it. So does everything seem clear, Andy, or you still confused a little bit about land, or no?
No, I follow you so far.
Okay, now what about labor, Andy? What do you think about that? Is it clear how that's a resource?
Yeah.
Okay, and I also want to point out, so could we throw other things in labor like we did with land? Like land includes oil, and it includes like forestry, it includes trees that grow on the land. What else would you put in a labor category?
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, so a lot of times people get a little bit confused that like there's different qualities of labor, right? You have skilled labor, unskilled labor, and those types of things. So not all labor, if you think about measuring it, is like equal, right? People that know how to run certain types of machines, like backhoes and construction equipment, they because of their labor, also because of the equipment, but because of their know-how, or even if you think about something a little bit more simple than that, like let's say a plumber, right? I'm not skilled at plumbing. I could have the exact same tools and everything like that to fix it, but I just don't know how. So the differences in the quality, and so closely related to that is what we call human capital, is a resource, and that's the knowledge, skills, and abilities of the workers. So right now, most economists would say, because you're in college, you all are investing in your human capital. You're developing skills and abilities that are going to make you more productive in your jobs in the future. Okay, so here is the last one, Andy, and tell me what you think about capital.
Capital as like a monetary value?
That's really interesting. Okay, but actually, no. So when economists talk about capital, unless they're explicitly referring to what I think you're talking about, which is financial capital, they're talking about physical capital. Does that help any?
kind of. I
Okay.
like briefly remember it, but I don't fully remember what physical capital would be.
Is that like
Okay.
buildings and equipment?
Yeah, it's tools, buildings, and equipment. It's actually all the stuff that you combine with labor other than the knowledge to make labor more productive. So, but yeah, like a house, it provides housing service on land. It's a building. That's physical capital. A backhoe, a wrench, a server farm, that Google uses to store and direct your search queries. That's physical capital. So physical capital is stuff that you can put your hands on that's going to help produce goods and services for your society when combined with labor. Now here's another question for you, Andy. So do you understand why when we talk about financial capital and we talk about capital markets, we normally like the word that people use is conflate, which means kind of like mix up physical and financial capital, why that happens so often?
You said financial and can you
Physical
repeat the question one
capital.
more time?
Yeah.
Physical capital.
Why people conflate, I mean, mix up physical and financial capital. So
I guess
because
because
go ahead.
go ahead. No, you can go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, because like oftentimes people talk about the capital markets, they're talking about the stock market, and it seems
Right.
like they're talking about financial flows. But here in economics, we're talking about hard, fast stuff you can put your hands on. Why do the two kind of get mixed up?
I guess because they both use the word capital, and in a sense, they kind of serve the same purpose. But I think that obviously the physical capital we're talking about as a resource in economics is vastly different than the financial capital. It's like, of course, you're going to need financial capital, but beyond that, this provides like a different service, I would say, like the tools and the resources that you use in order to, like you said earlier, expedite or make land and labor or like labor more efficient, I think is a little bit different. But I
Yeah.
could see where they can get confused oftentimes.
Yeah, well, so the thing is that if you think about the stock market, right, you buy a share of Amazon stock, right? And what does that give you title to?
I would say financial
Right.
capital.
Does anybody else have another idea? If you want to, go ahead.
Yeah, it gives you rights to a percentage of the stock.
Gives you a share of it or something.
Okay, so okay, you guys are jumping around. I get that dog pile here. So German, you had a comment. What was it?
It gives you like a percentage or share of the
company, right? You own a piece of Amazon. And what about Gil? You were going to say something?
I was going to say the same thing. Basically, like you have a right to a percentage of the company, preferred stock or limited stock, whatever it is.
Yeah, and so let's just say there are 100 shares of Amazon. Well, there are billions of shares, but to make it easy, right? And you own 2 shares. That means you own 2% of Amazon. So Gil, what does that really mean at the end of the day? What do you own 2% of?
You own 2% of the rights to be able to make decisions for the company. So you don't technically own anything. You just own a portion of a say, I guess.
Okay, well, I'll kind of help refine your knowledge, right? You're right. You do get to vote on things that shareholders get to vote on. Like, for example, you get to vote on who's going to manage the company. But you're wrong about one thing, and that is that you actually own 2% of everything that Amazon owns. So all of those warehouses, which are physical capital, all of those conveyor belts, all of those forklifts, and all of their computer network, you own 2%. Now, you cannot say, oh, my 2% is, this particular warehouse, right? Because it's all mixed up in ownership with other people. It's undivided in that sense. But if Amazon was to go bankrupt and they had to sell off all that equipment, you would get 2% of the proceeds. So I mean, what's intended with owning a stock is that you do own 2% of the physical capital of the company. Okay, but now you can see why, financial capital gives title to ownership of the physical capital, and why, physical and financial capital do seem so similar. And there are a couple of other examples that we could give, but at the end of the day, I just want to be sure that you all understand that when we talk about capital in this course, and in almost every other economics course that you take, except for a course like Money and Banking, which is about how the financial capital system works, we're going to be talking about real stuff that you can touch and put your hands on. Okay. So the last thing that we have to talk about, and I don't know if anybody has any questions at this point, but if you have a question, please raise your hand. But the last thing we have to talk about for the definition of economics is this: it's a scientific study. Okay, so let's see. Emily Harrison, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so what do you think we mean by it's a scientific study?
I guess for that aspect, that's where the mathematics come in, because you're probably hypothesizing using mathematics on how to figure out certain issues and like gauge how the market works.
Yeah, so I think you have the essence of it. So two things. When we're talking about doing something in a scientific way, right? Whatever we're going to be studying has to be measurable, right? So whether you're measuring liters of water or atomic mass, or you're measuring what we're going to talk about in a little bit, which is consumer welfare in the form of consumer surplus, we need a number, right? Measurement means we got to have a number someplace. And so there are lots of numbers in economics. In fact, a lot of folks are fond of saying that economics is an applied math discipline, and that's true. You say it's a social science, but it's a particular social science, and so it's social science that's closely married to mathematics, and so it's also an applied math discipline. And so and just to kind of like throw it out there, if you're thinking, well, what are other applied math disciplines? Well, probability and statistics is an applied math discipline, and so is electrical engineering, and so is most other engineering disciplines. They're applied math disciplines. So and then you said one other thing that is really important is, remember, science is about using the oh, I didn't mean to, I don't know if I'm gonna do that. Well, anyway, so science is about using the scientific method to acquire new knowledge. Okay. So Emily Harrison, do you remember what the scientific method is? You kind of mentioned it.
Isn't it basically you come up with a hypothesis and you gather information to prove it or to disprove it?
Yeah, so you come up with a test, and either the test supports or refutes, right? It either rejects or helps validate your hypothesis, and then you start over. Do it again, right? And the doing it again part is that if you end up with a test that appears to support your hypothesis, then you don't stop. You try to gather more data and you try to refine your hypothesis. And if it refutes the hypothesis, then you get rid of the hypothesis and you adopt a new one. So, and it's that chain of hypothesis, test, hypothesis, and test, and hypothesis, hypothesize and test again, that refines our knowledge and eventually results in a theory. And notice that, you know, the theories that we have in economics, the ones you're going to learn about in this class, are theories that are well supported by lots of evidence. But because it's a science, there's never the final word. In fact, there's a lot of research that's going on in economics. You can probably imagine that things have changed a lot because now we have all these new sources of data, and much more data than anybody had when a lot of these theories were first developed back in the early 19 and mid 1900s. So, you know, even as we're speaking right now, there are economists, and I just got a chance to visit with one yesterday, which is Vernon Smith. He's the Nobel Prize winner that's in residence at Chapman University, which is just down the 57 freeway. And, you know, Vernon at 92 years old is still, you know, conducting experiments along with other economists, trying to understand better how these, you know, economic forces work through mechanisms like the market to produce some sort of final outcome in terms of the way that resources are distributed. So it's an ongoing quest. And the more that you learn, the more you realize there are these gray areas where people don't really understand, or the evidence isn't very strong. You know, your generation, my generation, and still Vernon's generation are trying to improve our understanding. But the important thing is that it's not you know, a humanity type discipline, in the sense that you know, we're doing, like, let's call it, you know, sharing and self-exploration. We're not trying to, you know, invent stories. Sometimes we tell stories because they help, you know, convey an idea, but at the end of the day, we need to have evidence to support whatever our conclusions are. And if you don't engage in the scientific method, and there are lots of people that actually have lots of different ideas about the economy, as you might imagine, because particularly when we talk about things like you know, political economy, there's a lot of different incentives, right, for people to want to do things different ways, to try to get the government to, give them a greater share of the resources. And because of that, people are talking about, tax rates and the way the government spends money or how they control the money supply, and all these things that eventually are intended to influence who gets what in society. So I think I will kind of wrap things up with this general idea about, okay, what's microeconomics and what's macroeconomics. So microeconomics studies individual decisions of consumers, businesses, and individual markets. So like the market for tomatoes or something like that. And macroeconomics studies overall, and so I'm going to say many markets working together. Economic phenomena at a society-wide level. So, for example, inflation. So I'll put EG, inflation, unemployment, economic growth. Okay. Now there is a connection between microeconomics and macroeconomics, and that is that right, the macroeconomy relies on individual markets and individual behavior that's aggregated together. So a lot of times people, and this is more explicit in modern macroeconomic models and theories, that they say macroeconomics rests on microeconomic foundations. And so as you study more macroeconomics, you'll start to see overlap between things that we're studying this semester and what appears in some macroeconomic models. And I think there's a good question that's often been used to kind of summarize like what's going on in economics, and it's just the observation that every society has to decide one, what to make, how to make it, and 3, who is going to get it. And again, for most of the resources in our society, 70% of them, all of those decisions, what to make and how to make it and who's going to get it, are made through the market. And so we're going to study markets and how they function, and then we'll dig deeper as we get a little bit further in the semester. Okay, so are there any quick questions? Okay, seeing none,